All right, get ready for a whirlwind tour. We're going to cover 5,000 years of history, from the god kings who built the pyramids all the way to the revolutionaries who forged a modern nation. This is the incredible story of Egypt, and we're going to try and tackle it in the next few minutes. So let's just dive right in.
I mean, think about that for a second. How does any civilization last that long? For Egypt, the answer isn't just about hanging on. It's this incredible story of a culture that gets conquered again and again, but instead of disappearing, it somehow absorbs its conquerors. It reinvents itself time after time.
And this timeline, wow, it really puts things into perspective. Get this, the time between the Great Pyramids being built and the reign of Cleopatra, that's actually longer than the time from Cleopatra to us, right now. Just let that sink in. That unbelievable staying power is exactly what we're going to dig into. So, where do we begin? Well, you might think pyramids, right? But nope, our story actually starts with climate change. Way back, around 6000 BC, the land we now know as the Sahara Desert, it wasn't a desert at all. It was green. But then, it started to dry up, forcing people to move toward the one thing that could sustain them, that incredible lifeline, the Nile River. And you know, along the banks of the Nile, they didn't just scrape by. They thrived. They built something entirely new. These artifacts you're seeing, they show a culture that was already getting really sophisticated. We're talking intricate pottery, and get this, even the earliest forms of hieroglyphic writing, around 3200 BC. This was basically the blueprint for everything that was to come. So, with that foundation in place, the stage was set for one of the most, well, iconic eras in all of human history, an age of incredible power, of divine kings, and of buildings so amazing they still kind of baffle us today. Okay, so around 3150 BC, a ruler, his name was Narmer, he does something huge. He unites the two lands, Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north. And that artifact right there, the Narmer palette, that's basically one of the world's first history books, capturing that exact moment. This unification kicked off what we call the Old Kingdom, a time of amazing stability that gave us, you guessed it, those unbelievable pyramids at Giza. Now, historians like to break up ancient Egyptian history into three main peaks, three golden ages, really. You have the Old, the Middle, and the New Kingdoms. Think of them as these huge high points of power and prosperity, with some shaky periods in between, but each one just built on the last. And the absolute high point? Oh, that was for sure the New Kingdom. This was Egypt's empire phase. This is when you get the legendary pharaohs you've all heard of. People like Hatshepsut, a powerhouse female ruler. There was Akhenaten, the rebel who tried to change the entire religion. And of course, the great Ramesses II, the guy who basically put his name on everything he could build. But you know, when you're that wealthy and that powerful, you become a target. Egypt's golden age of being its own boss was about to come to an end because new superpowers were rising in the world, and they were all looking right at the Nile. And for almost 1,000 years, it was like a revolving door of foreign empires. First, the Persians took over, then came Alexander the Great, which started a few centuries of Greek rule under the Ptolemies. And finally, after the legendary death of Cleopatra, Egypt became maybe the most important province of all for the Roman Empire. It was their breadbasket. But this is where it gets really interesting. These new rulers, they didn't just steamroll Egyptian culture. A lot of the time, they actually adopted it. The Greek Ptolemies, for instance, had themselves depicted just like the old pharaohs. I mean, look at this carving of Cleopatra. She doesn't look like a Greek queen. She looks like an Egyptian ruler. It was a super smart way to make the people accept their rule. And this incredible cultural resilience, it wasn't just skin deep. It was literally in the people's DNA. A pretty groundbreaking study in 2017 looked at the genetics of ancient mummies, and they found that even after centuries of being ruled by different groups, the basic genetic makeup of the population stayed remarkably the same. The rulers might change, but the Egyptian people, they endured. So the next massive change to sweep through Egypt wasn't brought by soldiers, but by ideas. It was a spiritual transformation. Egypt became this fertile ground for new faiths that would completely reshape its identity, and honestly, the whole region. First came Christianity, and it spread like wildfire. The city of Alexandria became this huge hub for the early church, and eventually, the unique Egyptian Coptic church was born. But then, in the 7th century, came another huge shift. The Arab conquest introduced Islam to the Nile Valley, and that would define the region for the next 1,400 years and counting.
And look, this wasn't just about what god you prayed to. It was a total cultural shift. Over hundreds of years, the Arabic language and culture became dominant. The brand new city of Cairo was founded, and it grew into the capital of powerful Islamic empires, a real center of learning and art for the entire Islamic world. All right, so after all those centuries as a piece of someone else's empire, the modern era arrives, and with it, a really turbulent journey for Egypt to figure out who it was going to be in the modern world. And man, this period was just a total whirlwind. It starts with this ambitious modernizer, Muhammad Ali, whose family actually ruled right up until the 1950s. But his descendants got into massive debt, and that opened the door for Britain to occupy the country in 1882. Now, decades of British control just fueled this powerful nationalist movement, which all came to a head in the 1952 revolution that finally got rid of the monarchy and created the modern republic we know today.
And you've got to understand, this wasn't just a few powerful guys making a change. The push for real independence was a huge popular movement. What you're seeing here, the 1919 revolution, was a nationwide uprising against the British. It was this massive declaration of a new, modern Egyptian identity.
And that spirit, that idea of mass protest, it's a theme that just keeps coming back in modern Egypt. Fast forward almost a century from that last picture, and that same incredible energy just explodes again, this time in Tahrir Square during the 2011 revolution. And it worked. It toppled a president who'd been in power for 3 decades.
But it's important to see that while both of these revolutions totally changed the country's direction, they were really different beasts. The 1952 revolution, that was a military coup, led by officers like Gamal Abdel Nasser. 2011, on the other hand, was a grassroots civilian uprising, and it kicked off a much more chaotic, much more uncertain period of change.
Yeah, those years after 2011 were a lot. Power went from the military to the country's first ever democratically elected president. But that didn't last long before there were more mass protests and then another military takeover in 2013. This whole roller coaster period eventually led to the presidency of the former army chief Abdel Fattah el-Sisi back in 2014. So, when you step back and look at the whole incredible sweep of it, from pharaohs to emperors, from caliphs to presidents, the one thread that connects it all is this unbelievable resilience. This is a civilization that has absorbed conquerors, embraced new faiths, and built totally new political worlds, all while somehow always remaining unmistakably Egyptian. And that brings us all the way to today. After 5,000 years of recorded history, a story of stunning continuity and jaw-dropping change, we're left with one final question. In a world that is always changing, what will this ancient, incredible civilization teach us next about how to survive and how to reinvent ourselves?